the largest transfer of wealth in history. You keep hearing about this over and over and over. And you're like, man, what are they talking about? What's going on? Well, recent history is punctuated with a lot of not so great economic greats. Think the Great Depression to the Great Recession. Now we have a new one. Right, when they look back on the decisions made beginning at the beginning of 2020, and some of them still going strong, they're going to remember this as the Great Consolidation, the acceleration of a historic wealth transfer and power concentration out of the hands of the middle class and into those with political power and connections. Now, the connected, they're going to form a powerful bloc, big government, big businesses, big special interests. And though their monikers label them big, they are comprised of fairly small elites. And they are seeking to use their power to benefit themselves at your expense. So, prior to the COVID and all that stuff going on, more than 30 million small businesses accounted for about half the GDP and jobs in America. The other half of the economy was concentrated in 20,000 big companies. So you might have expected that small businesses would have had, an equal amount of negotiating power when the pandemic hit, just like big companies did. Wrong. Big companies have more lobbying dollars and more connections, and thus more ability to play the political game. Their deep pockets are balanced with a small enough scope to make them a government ally compared to the highly decentralized small business landscape. As a result, big firms were deemed essential and allowed to stay open during everything that was going on during the pandemic, right? And while small businesses were subject to punishing lockdown orders and forced to close, either partly or completely, many of the examples were doubtedly infuriating given the absurd hypocrisies that were presented. As an example, big box pet retailers like PetSmart that groom pet hair, nails, they were deemed essential while salons owned by small business owners that served humans were not. Now, the LA area, Pineapple Hill Saloon and Grill, they were forced to close their door outdoor dining, and while a movie production not only operated but hosted a catering tent serving food, in the same parking lot that the restaurant had been forced to abandon. Right, weed dispensaries, right, illegal just a handful of years ago in most, if not all, places, suddenly essential. So the result of this is it's fairly easy to follow. Spending that couldn't be done at closed businesses was shifted to the ones that were open, which those were the big, large businesses, right? Many of which naturally saw a substantial increase in their revenue. Meanwhile, now you have the Federal Reserve, who's pumping trillions of dollars into the market, helping to inflate stock valuations. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses were destroyed in just a few short months by government edict, while six, seven, eight tech companies they gained about 3.5 trillion in market value. If you were able to access capital, right, which is basically you're already big or wealthy, right? Even if you weren't in some cases financially sound, it was plentiful. And for debt capital, available at crazy low interest rates. 2020 became a record year for IPOs and for other capital raising vehicles like special purpose acquisition companies. Some of this capital was likely used to compete with your local small businesses. The one-two punch of government, fiscal, and Fed monetary policy continued to destroy the fabric of the economy for the average American. It dislocated the labor markets and the supply chain, and it's ultimately led to inflation, which is making the basic cost of living just much more expensive for Americans all across the country. Right? Think you go to the grocery store and everything costs more, or everything costs the same, but you're getting less, right? That's called shrinkflation, but it's still a form of inflation, right? You're getting less for your money, right? So in short, right? While your dollars today purchase fewer goods and services, and your lives are more expensive and disruptive, those who are well connected and asset rich, they benefited from outsized wealth increases driven by government policy. That's where you get that phrase, the rich get richer. Now, this all leads to fewer wealth creation opportunities for everyday Americans. It's harder and riskier to start and own a business. It's more challenging to save money, and when you do, you're facing inflated asset prices and more risk to earn what you would normally be considered an appropriate return. And unfortunately, there's no end in sight. I mean, there's new proposals backed by the Treasury Secretary to report on the inflows and outflows of bank accounts. Now, the first proposal was set at a $600 threshold. The latest is a $10,000 threshold. Of course, with exemptions for those connected to influential unions, like teachers. There's also a proposal to hire 87,000 new IRS agents, which we saw recently that's happening. Now, these proposals are being sold as a way to ensure billionaires pay their fair share. But given that there are fewer than 1,000 billionaires in the U.S., right, it's somewhere between 6 and 800 of them, and with legislation going into effect for 1099K reporting at hobby sites like eBay and Etsy, it should be clear that they're coming after the middle class, not those billionaires. The trillions of dollars being sought for infrastructure and social spending are also by and large a cash grab that would benefit those connected and potentially create further inflation, perhaps even combined with slower growth. There's nothing that seeks to expand wealth creation opportunities and make it easier for middle class Americans to thrive. It's nothing more than a cloak of promises that will ultimately lead to further wealth creation barriers. Consolidation of the economy only benefits those in the club. And even though it will likely destroy prosperity, the power hungry often don't care. Big business benefits from the decimation of competition. Special interests benefit from favors granted by big government, and big government benefits by having these powerful consolidated allies to keep its power and purview growing. So, the next time you hear someone say, "Oh, the biggest transfer of wealth is happening, right now," have a talk with them about it and say that you understand that wealth transfer is happening, but it might not be quite what you think it is. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, got some good information out of it. If you did, smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. But I tell you what, until I see you guys in the next one, y'all be safe.